This is the book, Neale Walsch, Conversations with God. Probably should have been really more accurately called Contradicting the Bible. It's on nice natural-looking whole wheat paper, very pulpy. I guess to make it look like it's very green conscious. The thing is, the more books that sold, the more trees that had to be murdered in order to print this book. Problem is, if Neale Walsch was just murdering trees, that wouldn't be so bad. But in this book, he actually murders logic. And I'll show that to you in a minute, but let me just discuss this idea that it's contradicting the Bible. Throughout the book, he attacks specifically the Bible over and over again. Here's a good example on page 127. He says, this is supposed to be God speaking, by the way, and God says, "My teachers have all come with the same message. Not I am holier than thou, but you are as holy as I am." Okay, so we see that as an obvious contradiction of the Bible. Now, the problem is with contradicting the Bible, you have to have the same authority that the Bible has in order to do that successfully. In other words, the Bible has laid out for us numerous prophecies from the days of old that have come true, giving the Bible the kind of credibility that compels us to treat it as an authority. For some examples, for instance, the ancient prophecy that the children of Ishmael will be at war with the children of Isaac throughout history. The foretelling of the history of the Jewish people very accurately. The foretelling of the coming of the Messiah and his paying for the sins of the world, that Jesus himself attested to over and over again, which, by the way, is one of the things also that Neale Walsch directly contradicts in this book, where he suggests, or actually he doesn't suggest, he says very directly that Jesus did not come to save the world because the world doesn't need to be saved, because the world is not made of sinners. So on one hand, he's trying to use Jesus as an example to support his view of what God is all about. On the other hand, he contradicts Jesus almost as frequently as he tries to use him to support his case. Now, there's an old expression of somebody contradicting themselves, we say, in the area of logic and argumentation, that they shot themselves in the foot. Now, in Dan Brown's Da Vinci Code, there's a good example of an author shooting himself in the foot when the professor is trying to make the case that Jesus would have been married because he was interested in or compelled to keep Jewish customs and traditions. But if that were the case, if you can argue that Jesus was keeping customs of the Jews, then why would he be participating in pagan fertility religion? See, and there's a case where an author shoots himself in the foot. Now, in Conversations with God, it's more like Neale Walsch shoots himself in the head because he blows his brains out on page 8. This is great. It's actually almost comical. This is supposed to be, once again, God speaking, and God says, "Words are the least reliable purveyor of truth." Okay, now this is God making his case that the Bible is not an authoritative source. This is supposed to be the same God, that created the universe now. But think about this statement: words are the least reliable purveyor of truth. Well, that is an assassination of logic, because if the statement's true, then it's false, and if the statement's false, then it's true. If words are so unreliable, then the statement, words are the most unreliable, is an unreliable statement. In which case, words are reliable. And if words are reliable, then you can trust that statement. But if you trust a statement, then words aren't reliable, because that's what the statement is trying to tell us. So there's a case. It's like Russell's set paradox, where if you have a set of sets that contain, or a set of sets that don't contain themselves in the elements, such a set would have to contain itself, because by definition, if it doesn't contain itself, well then it fits the definition. However, fitting the definition then would require it to go into the set, in which case it no longer fulfills the definition. You have to take it back out of the set. It's what I call an oscillating paradox. You put it in the set, you got to take it out. You take it out, you got to put it back in. If this, if Neale Donald Walsch's statement is true, then it's false, and if it's false, it's true. And by the way, after you get to that, and that's on page 8 of the book. So early in the book, he blows his brains out. You might as well discontinue reading the book if that's an accurate statement, because there's no reason to read the book. It's made up of words. And the reason I'm making the video, I guess, is because I saw this book recently on somebody's waiting room on their desk, and I figured, well, this book used to come up all the time when I was doing street evangelism. Some people swore by the book that I had to read it before they would even talk to me. So I read it. I found it to be have no authority whatsoever. It's strictly a god that Neale Donald Walsch has made in his own imagination, or perhaps worse, it's a god that is actually Satan deceiving Neale Donald Walsch. The whole idea of just contradicting the Bible, like this, reminds me of the Quran, where Muhammad decides that although he's supposed to be in agreement with the prophets that came before him, and by the way, the prophets that came before him had the credibility of history backing up their prophecies and so forth. So well before Muhammad, God had established his credibility. And for Muhammad to come along and contradict those very prophets he's supposed to be corroborating just would indicate to me that the Quran should be discarded, because it's obviously contradicting itself, and does not provide the authority of miracles and long history of proofs that the Bible has provided even before Muhammad ever came along. Jesus corroborated all the Old Testament prophets, and then Muhammad comes along and tries to contradict the whole thing. Now, I don't think he knew he was going to be contradicting, because he didn't even know, being illiterate, he didn't even know what those prophets had been saying in the first place. So his assumption was he was going to be in agreement with them. Later on, when they had the opportunity to hear from literate Jews and Christians, they realized that what the Jews and Christians were saying was in the Bible contradicted Muhammad's testimony, and thus Jews and Christians became persona non grata and a liability to Islam, and therefore, have been shunned ever since, because we know we know the history. We're educated, and it's an exposure to Muhammad. Well, the same thing applies here to Neale Donald Walsch and his logic murdering book, Conversations with God.